Hello, good afternoon. Are you a member?
If they ain't take him out, that boy would have kept going on the run, boy.
You think so?
Once you do it one time, you feel good to you. Do it again, they feel good to you. You keep going and going, and then you getting away with it.
Who you
and
think
then you get rich off it. You would have kept going.
Who you think would have been worse if they stayed alive? King Von or Behind Jeff? What made King Von so dangerous?
In the dark streets of Chicago, savages were constantly around. One of those savages was Dave Von Bennett, who would notoriously become known as King Von. Von was a different type of dark. He would allegedly murder his rivals and commit other acts of violence.
Was that a fucked up individual? No, it was a demon living in Von.
Something was wrong with him. That's not human, man. You're not regular, man. It was the devil, man.
But with them
Look how his ops talk about him.
They know he was on that shit.
Violence on social media, mocking the deaths, and making clear how prideful he was about his savagery. As time would go on, he would become a successful rapper, and music would be a new way to document his violence in an artistic format, but still in a way that he was able to glorify his dark behavior. Von's life is marked by a series of traumatic events, environmental pressures, and personal choices that have shaped his psychological makeup. His alleged violence and actions have been documented many times by now, but this isn't one of those. This is a deep dive into the mind of King Von, to understand his psychology and explore his evil.
What would you like up for?
Like a body into a tomb. I'm sorry?
Bro, murder cases.
The police officer said, I'm sorry.
He gets released because the witnesses come up dead.
Some people need to be gone, bro, in order for shit to get better. And he one of them.
Damn. Has it gotten better?
That's a good question.
When trying to understand why someone is the way they are,
Niggas
a
wanna be
good
King
place to
Von now.
explore is their childhood. Von was predominantly raised by his mother Natasha, who also had 3 other children. Von's dad, Walter Bennett, was in and out of prison and had made a name for himself in the streets. He went by the name Silk and had ties to the Chicago street gang, the Black Disciples, or BDs. However, being in this life rarely comes to a good end, and Silk's end was deadly.
Yeah, sniper. I hit him with a sniper rifle. They at the skate ring, but you know, that's another
I still
story.
don't get
Shot
that.
dead with a sniper rifle.
How you get hit with a sniper rifle in the middle of a city?
Shit.
That's crazy.
Niggas died in the middle.
Von would lose his father at the
I'm
age of
saying,
11
like-
years old. This would not only hurt
feel
him,
like you will
but
be
create a
out,
bigger
though.
void in his childhood.
There's
Whether
not
his
many
dad was
people that
alive
have a sniper. Just find who got the sniper.
or not. Him being
That's
in the streets a
crazy.
lot before his death deprived Von of a stable male role model, which can impact a child's development of identity, self-esteem, and understanding of societal norms. In fact, Von's stepfather was a drug dealer too, making drug money that could buy Von and his siblings nice shoes. So in terms of having someone to motivate him to get out the hood, that was void. The streets would have been glorified in his young, impressionable eyes. Being raised in South Chicago, Von had a lot of bad influence around him. Violence was a daily occurrence, and he picked up on it fairly quickly.
I like being outside, you know, one of the little boys that like sneaking out, just being outside all day, just doing bad shit. The gun, all that shit ain't come to play to like what, late 8th grade or some shit, 7th, 8th grade when it really got to that point where you gotta hurt somebody or somebody trying to hurt you and you gotta protect yourself.
So from potentially as young as 13 years old, Von would bring guns into school for protection. Instead of being able to focus on education and developing career prospects, Von had to worry about staying alive and making it through the school system without ending up a statistic. It's easy for people in privileged positions to look down on gang members causing violence in the streets, but growing up in the ghetto with prevalent crime and poverty exposes individuals to violence,
He said
instability,
growing up
and
in the
limited
ghetto.
opportunities.
You don't have a choice. Either you're gonna become this type of person or you're gonna get wiped out. So you come outside, you could be on, oh, I wanna get a job, I wanna be on the cool shit, you can't do it because they don't take it from you. You know what I'm saying? It's just different.
This environment can normalize illegal activities and desensitize individuals to violence. What is almost an inevitable outcome for someone in this environment is becoming affiliated with a gang. Around age 14 or 15, Von would move to the Parkway Gardens housing development. At the time it would be known as Wick City, but after a member of the gang named O.D. Perry was murdered, they renamed it O Block in his memory. O Block would be for block called Tucaville, which for the same reason as O Block, renamed their gang in remembrance of their murdered member, Tuca. Joining a gang can provide a sense of belonging and protect in remembrance of their murder.
Damn, they're around the corner from each other.
Member, joining a gang can provide a sense of belonging and protection. As Von's life would go on, you'd notice he's very much a people's
That Matt
person.
just painted
He'd
a
love
better picture
talking
for
and
me.
love hanging out with his associates, so being in a gang gave him that sense of belonging, especially one where they get to share their interest in deviance. But being in a gang also immerses individuals further into a culture of violence and retribution. As mentioned, these rival gangs had both lost members.
Now I
There
got a
would
better
continue to be
picture.
a tit-for-tat beef, one that Von would inevitably have to involve himself in. The close proximity between the two gangs and a lack of policing in the area made it easy to kill and have a lower chance of being caught, and therefore allowed members to have the potential of getting away with
Around the
murder.
corner.
We're going to take you
man.
now to Chicago, where this past weekend at least 52 people were shot, 8 of them killed, in a wave of violence across the city. What is going on there? Here's Chris Bury.
Von would first go to prison age 16 for armed robbery. Whilst in prison, Von would come out to multiple friends losing their lives in the streets. He would later exclaim how much this hurt him, saying these deaths changed his plans and now he has to get his hands dirty and pull his mask out. So after losing these friends in 2012, Von would feel vengeful and allegedly his violence would intensify. His own friend would later say,
in 2012, everybody couldn't hang with Von. If you was hanging with Von, you had to accept everything that came with Von. You had to accept that you was gonna be in shootings, accept that it was gonna be that, and you had to be with it.
However, something would happen that year that I believe really made Von go that one step further. On the night before his 18th birthday, Von and his friend Tony Dunn, known as White White, would go to a store. Von went in whilst White White waited outside. Von heard gunshots and ran outside, only to find his friend bleeding out on the floor. In the early hours of King Von's birthday, White White would be pronounced dead. Von would later say in his music that this event is what would turn him into a demon. Von losing close friends and even watching his friend die in the street were traumatic experiences that could have led to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, characterized by emotional numbness, hyperarousal, and intrusive memories. All of these are particularly important symptoms to focus on, but the key factor in Von becoming a demon would have been the emotional numbness. After seeing something so brutal, he no longer had any emotional barrier to murder. It was just an action, and retaliation by murdering someone else was just something that needed to be done. Within the next 3 months, Von would allegedly be involved in 2 murders. On the 13th of October 2012, he alongside his right-hand man and best friend T-Roy would allegedly shoot and murder a 17-year-old boy named Modell. Not even 3 weeks later, on the morning of October 30th, 23-year-old Derek Johnson, known as Crack, would drop his little cousin to school before going to get a coffee. Not long after, shots would ring out and Crack would be face down with 16 bullet holes in him, including his neck, chest, back and face. Von once more was heavily implied as the main suspect for this murder. Now, murder for survival would be one thing, but Von being an avid user of the platform X, formerly known as Twitter,
The fact that he
would
left
be something
Chicago
that
and
allows
got
us to
killed
get
in
some
Atlanta
sort
is
of
crazy
insight.
to me.
How is that crazy?
Because it's like not even in the city where you really went off on. And you come somewhere else where you're supposed to be a little more ducked off and still lost your life.
Into his mind, and these tweets would suggest that he got more than a feeling of survival from these murders. Following the deaths of both Modell and Crack, Von would tweet some sinister things. A week after Crack's murder, Von would tweet saying, "Acting tough, 6 shots up in your face." And the week after that, he would double down by saying, "Bang 6 times, all face." Although the crime report I looked at didn't state exact specifics, it does say Crack was shot 16 times, including the face. So 6 shots in the face would definitely be believable. Not only is this more gruesome and violent than just shooting someone from afar, but the fact he wants to relive it by announcing it publicly shows how much Von enjoyed the brutality of this murder. At the start of November, he also tweeted, "Damn, Modell and Crack got killed in October. Who's gonna get killed in November? Stay tuned." Suggesting he saw these murders as some sort of game or sport. I believe the reason he's able to see these deaths this way is due to that desensitization to violence. Repeated exposure to violent events definitely may have desensitized Von, making these violent acts feel justified. Also, with the added element of wanting revenge, he definitely didn't view these killings like a regular functioning human should. His self-identification as a demon after his friend's death indicates internalization of a violent persona, possibly as a coping mechanism or acceptance of a perceived destiny shaped by his environment. Also, the social media mockery is another part of his psyche that can't be ignored. Publicly mocking deceased rivals indicates a lack of empathy and possible antisocial personality disorder traits, such as disregard for others' feelings deceitfulness, and hostility. ASPD is what is commonly known as psychopathy. Von has a strong case for ASPD, as he never once displayed any signs of remorse or guilt for the actions he did. In fact, he showed enjoyment, pride, and excitement, like he wanted to keep doing it. Alongside this psychopathy, Von using social media as an open diary to boast about violent acts suggests narcissistic traits, including a need for admiration and a sense of superiority.
This man get it down
by
to the science behind Von.
18 years old, Von was already a narcissistic psychopath with a heavy desensitization to murder, and these traits would only reinforce and worsen as time went on.
Narcissistic.
In 2012, Von would be imprisoned for unlawful possession of a firearm. He would remain in jail for over a year, a period spanning from November 2012 to February 2014. When he came out, the violence started back up again.
So
I'm not
they
going to
know
focus
his
too
ass
much
was
on the
out there.
particular details of his alleged victims, but this next one does need some context to really understand the evil inside. 17-year-old gangster disciple Jakira Barnes, known as K.I., was a legendary figure in Chicago gang history. The Chicago Sun-Times referred to her as a female assassin. She was allegedly heavily involved in the killing of O.D. Perry, so her beef with O-Block and Von was intense. However, Von would treat K.I. very differently to his male rivals. He would tweet her constantly and act as though he was flirting with her. However, it's highly probable that he never actually liked her, but was probably trying to manipulate her so she could let her guard down, allowing him to kill her. He would say, "I think I love you," and call her wifey multiple times. Someone years later also allegedly hacked her Twitter account and posted her DMs with Von, and he was asking to sleep with her. This was prior to him going to jail, but when he got out, things got more hostile. Von had lost a friend whilst in prison called J Money, and would come out to K.I. mocking his death on Twitter, a taste of his own medicine. She even tweeted that if she could, she'd dig J Money up and shoot him again. Von would stop tweeting her for a couple months, and on April 11th, 2014, K.I. would be standing on a porch before being gunned down. She would be shot 9 times and be pronounced dead 2 hours later. Von would be picked up by the police later that month, but he was never formally charged with K.I.'s murder. The police were unable to charge him due to inconsistencies with witness statements. However, many years later in 2021, police finally revealed the murder was indeed Von's doing. Again, following this murder, police finally revealed the witness statements. However, many years later in 2021, police finally revealed the murder was indeed Von's doing. Again, following this murder, Von's mockery using social media will continue, tweeting, "I see people aren't going to get the picture till they get put in a frame," with a laughing emoji, which doesn't seem like the worst thing, but it becomes more sinister when you find out that was one of K.I.'s final tweets a week prior. After getting released by the police who failed to charge him with this murder, he tweeted, "Beating bodies ain't no going to prison," which fed his narcissism and made him feel invincible. And Von would prove how invincible he truly felt years later. Due to K.I.'s notoriety, allegedly killing up to 17 people as a female gang member, a documentary was being made about her. Due to an oversight from the production team or just a lack of research, they decided to ask King Von himself to be a part of the documentary and to speak on his relationship with K.I., not knowing that Von was her murderer. Von jokes about how he wanted to sleep with her, occasionally grinning, as the murder potentially replays in his mind. Being in this documentary would have boosted his narcissism, knowing he wasn't just getting away with murder, but was being able to mock it on a bigger scale. In Von's mind, impunity was constantly reinforced. This is the ability to act with exemption from punishments, losses, or other negative consequences for his actions. Repeatedly evading legal consequences may have reinforced his belief in him being untouchable, making risky and criminal behaviors something he'd want to keep pursuing. In fact, the same month he was released for the K.I. murder, he would murder again. On the 29th of May 2014, a birthday party would be going on that Von attended. It stated that Von was chatting up other party guests until he spotted 2 rival gang members at the house and took off. Time went by, and later on, one of Von's rivals looked up and saw Von with an associate approaching the house, and the 2 of them fled. Von chased them whilst firing his gun, hitting both of them, but they got away. When the smoke had cleared, Malcolm Stuckey, a 19-year-old that wasn't one of Von's rivals, was face down on the grass between the sidewalk and street. He had been shot 4 times, including one to the head, and would be pronounced dead at the scene. The reason this is important is because although Von almost certainly did this murder, he would never brag about it or make fun of it on social media. This shows us that Von's satisfaction only comes from making his rivals lose their friends. He enjoys brutally taking something from them, and not just murder in and of itself. Von would remain in jail for this murder awaiting trial, from June 2014 to December 2017. 3.5 years in jail. However, by some powers, he managed to escape long-term punishment. Von's accomplice in the shooting would back out of his deal with the courts last minute, and in a crazy turn of events, Von would get away with this murder as they had no more strong witnesses willing to testify against him. I don't even think it needs to be stated how much this would have been a driving force for his grandiosity and narcissism, as down the line he would continue to be braggadocious about what he's done in the streets, but upgrading from Twitter to a more artistic format. After coming out of prison, he seemed to have a particularly strong bond with his friend from young, Dirk Banks, known as Lil Durk. Dirk also came up in Southside Chicago, but had made it out using music. Dirk knew about the work that Von had done in the streets, and knew that telling these stories would appease music fans in that genre. So with Dirk's encouragement, Von picked up a mic and started rapping. Von was used to bragging about his street work via Twitter, so he quickly became accustomed to spilling his truth into his raps, saying lines like, "Caught a body, beat that body, catch some more," which could be a reference to any of his alleged murders, even some I haven't covered. In fact, Von would
Why
gloat
you
about
shaking
being
your
3
head?
murders
That
away from
nigga's a
having
demon, bro.
double digits, which really makes you question how dark he could have been. And his work in the streets has even coined him with the label of a serial killer. A serial killer is a person who murders 3 or more people, check, with the killings taking place over a significant period of time in separate events, check. Their psychological gratification is the motivation for the killings. The motives of the serial killers can include anger, thrill-seeking, financial gain, or attention-seeking. Von's motives could have been any of these. The anger from getting revenge for his murdered friends, the thrill-seeking if these murders are just a progression of his deviance as a child, or the attention-seeking as even when he wasn't a music artist,
That nigga got
he
5
would still
checks.
use social media to gain street cred and a level of notoriety for his violence and evil. As surprising as it may sound to have a serial killer in the modern day, let alone one that became a famous
the eyes
music
they put
artist,
on this.
this label may actually be true for Von. Starting a music career provided an outlet for his experiences, but he continued to glorify violence in his lyrics, possibly making this the way to gratify his criminal activities and status, without having to continue the risk of getting caught in the streets. He gained a big audience for his gritty lyrics and depiction of the realism of being a killer in the streets, and this allowed him to be put on a big pedestal for these acts of evil. Von's success in music didn't stop his deviance, however, but from what I've researched, it stopped him murdering directly. In August 2020, a rival of his named FBG Duck, who also made music, was gunned down in Chicago in front of a designer store. Although Von wasn't physically there committing the murder, he allegedly put a $100,000 bounty on his head, using his newfound music money. This further proves that Von's satisfaction comes from seeing his rivals die, more than the act of killing itself. Von felt on top of the world. In October that year, he put out a tweet saying, "Everything you out there doing in the streets, I've did it times 10 and got away with it. I got caught for it, got out again, and did it some more. Then I got rich and took care of everything and everybody. We'll never be equal." He clearly felt super prideful that he'd done so much and believed that he was the top guy in the game. But they say to never be too comfortable at the top. Von had a minor beef with another artist named NBA Youngboy, who had an artist signed under him named Quando Rondo. And
That little motherfucking demon right there.
What?
Go.
amongst the street nature, an associate of an op is also an op, so Von and Quando didn't like each other. One day after one of Von's shows, he would be outside a club and see Quando, and within seconds, he'd swing at him and start a fight. However, Quando's friend Lil Tim would hop out of the vehicle and shoot Von. Von had been hit multiple times and would later be pronounced dead.
26.
I let little Tim come
Von's
catch his
psychological profile is complex, shaped by early trauma, environmental factors, and individual choices. His behaviors suggest the presence of antisocial personality disorder, characterized by a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others and societal norms. The combination of a traumatic upbringing, lack of positive role models, reinforcement of violent behaviors, and absence of legal repercussions created a perfect storm for the development of his criminal identity. The only time Von ever showed vulnerability was upon learning about his best friend's death while he was incarcerated. Von was imprisoned awaiting trial after his murder of Malcolm Stuckey, and during that time, his best friend and right-hand man T-Roy, who Von had committed a lot of these violent acts with, was shot and killed in a shop. Von would admit that upon hearing about T-Roy's death, he was in tears.
Miss my dog. Before they get my dog, I was locked up. Killed me, I broke down. I ain't cried so long.
His admission of crying indicates that he was capable of deep emotional connections, albeit limited to a select few. It was the same emotions that he channeled after the losses of his other friends to turn to killing as revenge. Despite these moments of grief, he did not regret his involvement in the street life. This suggests a compartmentalization of his emotions, where he could experience personal loss without reassessing his lifestyle choices. His music career, which celebrated and glorified his violent actions, not only reinforced him being dark and twisted, but also potentially influenced others, perpetuating the cycle within his community. In the end, Von was only ever bound for his actions to have consequences, and in the eyes of some, he survived way longer than he should have.
If they ain't take him out, that boy would have kept going on the run, boy.
You think so?
Once you do it one time, you feel good to you, do it again, it feel good to you, you keep going and going, and then you getting away with it,
Who you
and
think,
then you get
if they
rich off
would've
it, you would have kept going.
Who you think would have been worse if they stayed alive? King Von or Bloodhound Lil Jeff?
King Von.
What?
Because Bloodhound Lil Jeff is just the JR of King Von.
No. He had more bodies, so he said. And he was killing and not caring and going on live right after. No, King Von wasn't doing that. He wasn't going on live right after his kills. He was making songs years after.
He didn't have to do
that. Lil Jeff. Y'all boys. I'm so happy. I knew he was dead before the news.
They both crazy.
What y'all think? Lil Jeff or King Von?
King Von was the king of the shit.
I want y'all motherfuckers to subscribe to Foreign TVO. I don't give a fuck. Better subscribe, motherfucker. If not, security gonna get your ass. Pup, pup.